so much has played out in the country. And of course, the latest is the 2023-2024 finance bill. It's a conversation that we'll be having right here. It's good to have you. Karibu sana. This is Morning Cafe. My name is Linda Alela. The Azimio, in a statement to counter the finance bill, that is 2023-2024, has labeled it a promissory note to strangle and suffocate the hustler that Ruto promised to remove the rope from, that is during the campaigns. The JFP party, on the other hand, says the president should avoid invading citizens' sovereignty by dictatorial funds, which are not of priority to the majority populace. And of course, if we want to fund the projects, definitely it is not about exploiting the public, but definitely exploiting the public-private partnership. The citizens don't please them. This is what they would basically say. So today, the Finance Bill 2023-2024 is Kenya's greatest fear, as this bill sits in the presence of a parliament awaiting approval or disapproval or amendment. We are staring at a 3.6 billion or trillion budget proposal by Kenya Kwanza, not knowing just where the money to fund it then comes from. Welcome on board. This is basically what we'll be looking at this morning. Later on, also, we get to understand some more on question of health, that is on cerebral palsy. So we look forward to hear from you as we have this conversation. It's basically what everybody is talking about. That is away from health. That is the finance bill. Just what do you make of it? And Makiu, you only have very few days to make sure that at least you make your proposals as to this at the level of parliament so that we get to know what way forward. So as we have this conversation, I hope that you could interact with us. The hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Alela TV 47KE. I'll be looking at some of your comments as we continue with the broadcast. Allow us to briefly look at what the papers detail this morning, and then we'll be getting into that conversation straight with specialists in relation to that, as well as a historian who will perhaps paint a picture of what the question of finances has been in the country over the years. The Standard newspaper, the People Daily, as well as the Daily Nation are the papers that we have this morning. And to start us off is the People Daily. Deal with Germany boosts the production of clean power. A story captured on page 15. Of course, we've seen the German chancellor being in the country, and these numerous promises of jobs for the people of Kenya in Germany is perhaps the conversation that has been there, and largely just how these two nations can work together for the benefit of the Germans themselves, as well as the benefit of the people of Kenya, and this including on the question of production and how best, of course, we can ensure that we boost clean power in the country. That is a story expounded on page 15 of the People Daily. Universities have until today to reveal cost of their courses as well. This is one of the things that has been playing out, and in relation to the proposal by the government as to how then university students will be paying their fees, of course, based on the levels of, of life, if one would want to look at it that way. And so we are having these reactions from COOPS, as well as, of course, this is the latest one in relation to what universities have to deal with, or how they have to balance, of course, their ways to make sure that they reveal the cost of their courses. A story captured on page 6. It's actually one of the big stories, even as we find our students going back to school, and we seek to understand of what importance it will be, especially for those ones that have found it very difficult to be able to pay for fees, and as well in relation to the question of help and how this is accorded to the students, and just how manageable the fees would be for a majority of them. This even as their complaints as to the coming in, or the preference of private universities to public universities, something that the government says they seek to adjust on. Raila tax plan Raila says that Ruto tax plan is a big burden to the common mwananchi, or the common hustler, as the Kenya Kwanza would call them. An uproar over the budget as the Mio leader and union bosses reject Kenya Kwanza proposal, as they warn that they will make sure that, their legislatures, that is at the level of parliament, will not proceed to vote for this very bill. They say that this will make the workers poorer, and Kenyans have 3 weeks to give their views before Treasury CS tables finance bill that is in the House. A story captured on page 4 and 5, the biggest story of the day, one that we'll be deciphering upon as we also get the view of the finance or the economic specialist on board. Reforms in the pipeline for prisons. Interior CS Kithure Kindiki, of course, as you can evidently see, says that there is need for us to have all these reforms that would be necessary for making sure that, of course, the pipeline prisons are well managed amid all these complaints that things have not been all rosy. And as you can see, this is one of the stories that has been captured on page 3 of the People Daily. Says prisons workshops will be given about 1 billion facelift, and definitely this facelift perhaps an important move towards making sure that then activities at this level are done as expected. The government will spend about 1 billion, as you can see here. That is to modernize prisons workshops to promote industrialization and enhance production of quality products. As you have seen, most of the prisoners are the ones who are always out there tasked towards, coming up or making some of these, furniture, or so to speak, that is used at the level of government, and some of them actually sold to the people of Kenya. And so that makes it, a plus, or gives it a plus in the sense that what it is that then they will be producing is quality stuff based on this facelift that will be experienced. That, of course, is another story that is on the front page of the People Daily. Arrested for robbing members of parliament. A man who is 34 years old seems so proud to steal about 700,000 from legislators. Also, that is a story that is captured on page 3 of the People Daily. Perhaps a developing story, one that will be giving you updates on as it unravels. Azimio gives 2-day deadline on bipartisan talks. The story captured on page 7. They say that they have to see this commence, otherwise they'll be out of this, because then they say looks like there's no that aspect of goodwill from the Kenya Kwanza side to commence these conversations and towards the positive sides, while the Kenya Kwanza government as well has complained, or the members have complained, that the Azimio side as well does not have that aspect of goodwill to make sure that this then is equally addressed. And on this other side, 6 bank CEOs make about 869 million in annual pay. That's an interesting piece that you'd perhaps want to read on the business beat. On the other side, on tax pain, you are on your own, as they would say. Opposition coalition opposes the proposed new tax measures and makes an admission that the finance bill may pass in parliament because of government's overwhelming support and majority. And with Azimio not providing alternative measures to rein in government's appetite for extra money, Mwananchi has been left on their own. A story captured on page 4, the big story that we'll be looking at. And as well, this that has played out while we are away, or I was away, but of course, Stanley Nyangerita, I think I should be telling him thank you so much for steering the wheel. As expected, police stick to link Pastor Ezekiel to money laundering. This is a story captured on page 6. The court has ordered for the freezing of embattled pastor's 28 bank accounts, among them 3 in foreign currencies. And that is after police sought to link him to Pastor Mackenzie's activities. A story captured on page 6. That is on the front page, expounded on page 6 of the Standard newspaper. We'll be looking at that as we continue with the broadcast. Let us see what the Daily Nation has to say on this very morning. Raila takes on Ruto in tax battle. That's also a big story. And we're talking about these punitive measures that have been brought to the fore. Azimio leader Raila Odinga asked the National Assembly to reject punitive taxation measures contained in the finance bill, that is 2023-2024, saying they will escalate the cost of living and hurt the economy. Expounded on page 4 and 5, we're looking, or will be looking at the proposed taxes, those ones that are quite contentious. The housing fund, definitely many people speaking to it. The VAT on fuel as well, one of the conversations that has been there for the longest of time, and perhaps it's going to hit hard, hitting the 16% away from the 8%. Remember, this also has been there during the times of Uhuru Kenyatta, that wasn't well received, and as well as pay as you earn, employees earning about 500,000 and above to pay about 35% up from 30%. These are the key stories, these are the contentious issues on this proposed bill, and we'll be seeking to get the view of the gentleman that I'll have on set, as well as your view. Remember, the hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela TV47KE. I will continue sampling some of these comments. Missing body parts charged as Pastor Ezekiel's 20 bank accounts frozen. That as well we have picked on. Why have you forsaken me? I now understand politics better. When I was governor of Kiambu, I used to get a lot of calls that is from different people, but now they don't pick my calls. A story captured on page 10 as, of course, clear or, a classic example to show that, yes, power is transient, and most of the times you're reminded, please be careful when you sit on this seat of power, because then it's just a matter of time that you're out, and once you're out, the story then changes. We'll be looking at that as we continue. On the other side, Varsity and TVET courses portal opens next week. Students hoping to join universities and technical and vocational education and training, that is TVET institutions, to make their applications. Then, of course, this is according to KUCCCPS, scopes as you would want to call it, for this very conversation that has been captured on the back page, to make sure that you get yourself enrolled in the right institution and equally taking the expected course. Allow us to shelve the papers for a moment and take a look at some of the stories that we have prepared for you as we proceed. And that with Kenya Kwanza government having been elected on their economic agenda, that is for Kenyans, President William Ruto has appealed to Dutch businessmen to invest in Kenya in a bid to boost the micro, small and medium enterprises. Flora Limuki with more.
As President William Ruto continues to make efforts to improve the economy by focusing on small-scale traders, he has invited Dutch businessmen to Kenya to invest in micro, small and medium-sized enterprises on his tour to the Netherlands.
Bringing on board another 5 special and export economic zones in Kenya, in Kirinyaga, for those of you who know the geography of Kenya, in Thika, in Nakuru, in Eldoret, and in Busia.
Ruto has reiterated that it is the government's commitment to making Kenya an attractive investment destination. The president also appealed to foreign investors to inject their finances in the affordable housing project, preventive healthcare, MSMEs, and the creative economy.
In the Africa strategy that we, as the private sector, developed in the Netherlands aims to double its trade and investment relationship with Africa in the coming years. We look for equal and sustainable trade relations with Africa, not just for our own earning capacity, but more importantly, to create impact and broad prosperity in Africa. Within this strategy, Kenya is one of the countries we take a specific interest in, with all the opportunities it offers.
As you know, we import a broad range of high-quality agricultural products from Kenya, especially Kenyan flowers, and horticultural products are all well known in the Netherlands. And besides agriculture, we see many opportunities for economic cooperation in logistics, life science and health, in water, renewable energy, and in e-mobility.
The visit has culminated into matters climate change, which is now a global threat to all nations, and the dangers it poses to generations and how nations can better tackle it. Flora Limuki, TV47.
All right. So Kenya's prisons were once infamous, the community maximum prison being one of the worst. However, significant reforms were implemented during the tenure of former Vice President Moody Awori. One such reform was the opening up of prisons to allow visitation of incarcerated individuals by their loved ones, as reported by Chichi Josephine.
Universal justice, integrity, leadership by example, credibility, loyalty and discipline is the motto to Kenyan prisons. It's been 20 years down the line since the paradigm shift reforms from punishment to correction and rehabilitation were introduced by the then Vice President Mudi Awori, popularly known as Uncle Mudi. Mudi Awori introduced a raft of reforms, among them opening up jails so that people could visit their relatives, introduction of beds and mattresses, television sets in cells, and the game changer was the introduction of education to inmates. In 2014, for the first time, an inmate graduated with a law degree, a clear indication that the reforms have had positive effect on the country's relapse rates.
Mkiwa hapa mmejifunza na mnafunzwa mambo mengi, kurekebisha tabia na kujifundisha utaalamu ambao mtatumia siku ile mtatoka hapa gerezani.
20 years later, the government still insists that prison should not be hell and should be a place of reforms and rehabilitation, according to the Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki, who announced that the government has plans to implement the reforms that were initiated by Awori.
We have initiated and drafted a new correctional services policy for our country. It is waiting cabinet approval. In another 1 month or so, we'll have a new modern correctional services policy for the Republic of Kenya.
With the total number of inmates in Kenya being over 100,000, the question remains, how possible will it be to provide humane treatment to every inmate? As for instance, a 3x6 bed goes for 3,000 and a mattress goes for 1,000 Kenyan shillings.
Tumeanza mpango wa kuhakikisha kila mfungwa katika taifa letu la Kenya lazima awe na kitanda na awe na mattress yake.
Decongestion of prisons could be a solution done only by reviewing the Prison Act Cap 90-95 by the judiciary, as well as applying alternative dispute resolution mechanism on petty crimes.
Tunaongea na idara ya mahakama, tunaongea vile vile na idara ya mashtaka ya umma ili tuhakikishe ya kwamba mtu akai rumande kwa muda mrefu. Vile vile wafungwa ambao wako na makosa madogo hakuna haja kurudikana katika jela. Tunataka wapewe bond, wafanye suspended sentences, wafanye community service huko nje.
Chichi Josephine, TV47.
Well, thank you, Chichi, for that great reminder. Now, Turkana Governor, that is Jeremiah Lumurkai, has accused West Pokot County government of what they termed as plotting a scheme to forcefully hive off a piece of land belonging to the Turkana County, that is government. In response, the West Pokot County government has rubbished the claims, calling upon the DCI to move with speed and intervene in the conflict. The story was produced by Andrew Juma.
Barely a week after President William Ruto ordered the installation of a police camp at Lami Nyeusi area, an area that has for the longest time seen locals perish through severe banditry attacks, Turkana Governor Jeremiah Lumurkai has fired back, saying the area belongs to Turkana County.
Mambo ya kukuja kujenga police station. Sisi hatuna shida na police station kuwekwa katika junction ambayo inaelekea Lorokon ikielekea Kainuk na pia ikielekea Kitale. Hatuna shida nayo, lakini hiyo area iko ndani ya Turkana County government. Iko ndani ya Turkana. Mpaka iko mbali. Kuleta matrakta yenu. Kama matrakta yenu imekosa kazi, tafadhali mpeleke huko Kapenguria headquarters, mwene mpaka huko. Lakini kuleta hizo matrakta kuja kufiata area yetu, eti police station ya West Pokot inajengwa ndani ya Turkana County, ni uchokozi mkubwa. Na mimi kama gavana ambaye ninapenda amani, tafadhali hatutakubali huo upuzi.
Speaking in Lodwar, Governor Lomurkai accused the West Pokot County government of allegedly wanting to hive off part of the land and claim it.
Hiyo police force mpaka mimi nipokee kama gavana wa Turkana County. Kwa sababu hiyo ardhi ni ardhi yetu. Hapo Kainuk, hadi mahali inaitwa Marich, hapo ni kaunti ya Turkana. Na inatakana hiyo mchanga ambayo imepeanwa kwa security officers, watu wa KDF, watu wa ASTU, watu wa GSU, watu wa Kenya Army. Sisi tunasema karibuni mweke kambi hapo. Lakini jambo ambalo tunapinga, viongozi wa Pokot wawezi kuja wakapeana greda na waseme hapo ni kwao.
In response, West Pokot County government has rubbished the claims, saying the area belongs to West Pokot County.
Tuseme mambo ya boundary tutafanya namna gani? Lakini uwezi enda kwa public uongee. Na sisi tunajua vizuri Lami Nyeusi ni upande ya West Pokot. Na sio siri. Na wewe mwenyewe gavana mzima unaelewa hivyo. Lakini unaenda kuambia Waturkana ati hiyo hapo Lami Nyeusi ni yetu. Hiyo ni uchochezi na mimi nasema hiyo ni reckless. Na najua na tunasikia siri, kuna mambo wewe gavana wa Turkana unafanya mingi, tunasikia. Kuna mambo yako unafanya mingi na tunasikia wewe unachochea watu wa Turkana kupigana na Pokot. Sisi tumesikia mara nyingi. Wewe mwenyewe unachochea watu. Na unaongea nje pale ukisema unapenda amani. Upende amani.
Sisi tulikuwa marafiki na Kainuk. Tulikuwa na tumesoeana. Lakini kitu kidogo inafaa ile msozo ilianza kupigwa ng'ombe. Sababu ya ujinga ya kuambiwa hii watu wamenyang'anya sisi sijui ardhi yao.
Leaders from both counties are now calling the police to intervene, citing allegations of incitement.
Zile gazetted police post, kwa sababu ni serikali ndio iliweza kugazeti hizo police post. Na ni jukumu la serikali pia ilete polisi pale. Na hawa polisi wakikuja hapo itawalinda wakaaji wa Turkana, itawalinda wakaaji wa Pokot. Polisi ni polisi ya Kenya, si polisi ya West Pokot.
The issue now has been escalated to President Ruto to intervene and find a long-lasting solution. Joash Onsare, TV 47.
Now, one family in Kiptuia area, Chesumei constituency in Nandi County, is calling for action to be taken against Preacher Paul Mackenzie for misleading the public by using strong religious beliefs. They made these remarks after claiming that they are searching for their 5 loved ones who were believed to have disappeared in the Shakahola area. Chris Bett tells us more.
They say the pain of a child is best felt by the mother, and that is exactly what this mother is going through. She claims that her son Wycliffe Omondi and his 4 grandchildren perished in Shakahola area of Malindi County.
Tulikuwa siku moja kama tunawatafuta baada ya mwaka moja. Mwaka wa pili ndio tulianza kujua hao watoto wameenda kwa Mackenzie. Tulipata contact ya Mackenzie kwa nyumba. Tukaangalia, tukasoma, tukapata jina ya Mackenzie iko hapo. Kila kitu iko hapo, namba yake iko. Tukampigia. Alishika simu na akarudi akafunga simu.
This family claims that the 5 loved ones disappeared in 2021 while they were in Kisumu County.
Shida ambayo iko ni ya kuwa nimepoteza watoto 3, ndugu na shemeji yangu kule Shakahola. Ilikuwa mwaka wa 2020 wakati ya mwisho wakati wao watoto walipotea.
Hao watoto kwa boma, sisi kwetu tuko na boma kule Kisumu, lakini hapa sisi tumenunua tushamba. Sasa walikuwa kwenye boma kule Kisumu, hapo ndo mahali hao watoto walipotelea wakati wa kwanza.
Morris Yimbo, the father to Collins Lijodi, who is 14 years old, Godwin Maxwell, who is 17 years old, and Vincent Lihanda, 21 years old, claims that the 3 were taken to the area by the relative Wycliffe Omondi, who was living in Kisumu City.
Ndugu yangu alianza kushika mtindo ya kuwa anaenda kila wakati na kijana yangu mkubwa anaenda naye kanisa. Pili alikuwa anaenda naye kanisa, wakawa wanaendelea, wakawa wanarudi usiku. Wakirudi usiku saa 4 saa 5, nikiwauliza mmetoka wapi? Ati maana tulienda Kakamega ama safari ya mbali. Ikawa sasa wanamaliza mpaka Monday wanakuja. wanarudi Mondays jioni. Nikamwambia ndugu yangu, hii mambo sioni. Nikaita wazazi, nikaweka chini, nikaongea nao.
Currently, these families pleading with the government, stating that even if the bodies of their 5 loved ones are confirmed through the ongoing DNA investigation, they will be unable to retrieve the bodies from Kilifi County.
Ile kitu tunaomba serikali ya kitaifa na serikali ya county pia, watoto wako mbali. Ikiwa mwili hizo zitapatikana, tunaomba msaada, hii mwili tuletewe nyumbani.
Mimi nadia na machozi yangu, nadia kweli watoto wangu. Hatuna kuweza kufika Mombasa, hata mimi sikufika huko. Sina nguvu. Ruto asaidie sisi.
Chris Bet, TV 47.
The school was closed on the 3rd of last month following an outbreak of an unknown disease that led to the deaths of 3 students and 1 teacher. And as our reporter Violet Auma reports, some parents have decided to transfer their children to other schools for fear of their safety.
After elaborate preparations for the official reopening of Mokomo Girls High School that had been closed for a month due to an outbreak of unknown disease, it has finally been reopened, with this year's Form 4 candidates being the first to arrive at the school. One by one, the students arrived ready for their studies. Here, 250 out of 462 Form 4 students who arrived being examined by medics at the school, as well as receiving counseling following the outbreak of the disease in the school last month, which claimed the lives of 3 of their schoolmates and a teacher.
In school, we have the psychosocial counselors who are dealing with the issues. Maybe if a student feels she needs to be counseled, she goes there. We also have medics who are around to check their medical documents. So before they are reporting back, we had requested their parents that they should take them to hospital so that they are checked. As they come back, they have come with their medical reports. But the medics on the ground are also confirming those reports.
The newly appointed school principal, Jen Mbone, said that the normal activities are expected to resume after the arrival of Form 3 students tomorrow, with Form 2 and Form 1 students expected to arrive on Thursday and Friday respectively.
We've gone in for new cereals, and already today we've received the beans. We have the public health officers around. They want to ascertain that the beans that has come in school is okay. Tomorrow we'll be receiving the maize. So we are not receiving any water from any other source. The only water we are receiving in school now is from the Lake Victoria. All the tanks were flushed. Everything else, it was also chlorinated.
Although some of the parents we spoke to expressed satisfaction with the measures taken by the school management to ensure safety of their children, some parents who decided to transfer their children had conflicting feelings.
Our candidates ndio walikuwa affected sana. But we want to thank God that when we came on 29th of last month, we were assured that most of the things had been rectified.
And we have been told all the precautions has been taken. And so we have to bring back the candidates.
Principal mwenye yako sahi ni mtu mwenye nasikia maneno sister huyo. Nimekaa naye amenikaribisha, hata soda amenipatia nimekunywa. Tumekaa naye vizuri sana, tumeelewana na yeye.
So up to now I may not know the number that will transfer. But so far today I've signed around 4 for those transferring. But we've not had any candidate transferring. We only have Form 1 and 2 who are transferring.
This comes a few days after the government destroyed 800 bags of cereals that were suspected to be contaminated with poison at the school.
The psychologist.
Violet Auma, TV 47, Kakamega.
Now, Azimio la Umoja has hinted on endorsing other options should the bipartisan talks, which House told, fail to work. According to the party leader Raila Odinga, the team has up to Wednesday to begin the bipartisan talks. And as Cheptuboit now reports, the Azimio team might be forced to go back to the streets at the slightest inconvenience from the Kenya Kwanza coalition.
Azimio leader Raila Odinga has now given the government a 2-day ultimatum to begin the bipartisan talks. According to Odinga, the talks should start earnest Wednesday this week, failure to which they shall be forced to endorse other options available to them. The Azimio leader has in the past insisted on going back to the streets if the talks don't bear any fruits.
We have given them today and tomorrow. We have said that the talks must start in earnest on Wednesday. And if the delegation is not ready by Wednesday, we will treat that gentleman's agreement as cancelled. And we will then now explore other options available to us as Azimio.
Odinga says that Kenya Kwanza have shown signs of reluctance to the talks, saying members of Kenya Kwanza are not available to discuss the issues that have put them at loggerheads.
We knew that the real reason why they're doing it is because they are expecting the visitors were coming into town. And they did not want demonstrations at that time. But we did act in good faith ourselves because they said they were serious. Now we are seeing signs of reluctance. We're seeing signs of reluctance. Now all members of the other side are not available. They don't have a quorum to begin the discussions and so on.
However, Odinga has accused Kenya Kwanza of buying off its members and hence enjoying what they have termed as an artificial majority in parliament.
The requirement is that if a member moves from the coalition or political party in which he was elected, that member is required to resign his position in parliament and seek a re-election through a by-election into the new outfit in which he has moved. This has not happened. And you've seen members of, for example, Jubilee, who are an Azimio coalition, go on the other side. UDM was the first one to go. And now there's Scoop, which is saying to have gone to the other side.
Odinga had initially called off the protests on 3rd of May in light of the bipartisan talks. Odinga had given Kenya Kwanza an ultimatum of 30 days to conduct the talks. However, Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah says the talks could take up to 60 days before conclusion. Azimio la Umoja wants the talks to be held out of parliament, a move the Kenya Kwanza team has been stiff about, insisting the talks shall be held in parliament. Azimio wants non-parliamentarians involved in talks and the resolutions be passed without going through parliament for approval. Chepto Boyd, TV47, Nairobi.
All right, and the next story that I'm about to read is what forms the basis of our conversation this morning. And we are having a finance, or better yet, economic specialist for this very conversation, CPA Dr. Githai. I'll be introducing him shortly, as well as CPA Alex Kamau. And also joining us later is Professor Macharia Munene for this very conversation. Perhaps you could be having questions revolving around this. Perhaps you have not understood just what exactly is this finance bill and why the jitters. I mean, this is the moment for you to sit down and get to listen to this gentleman as we try and unpack what it is, what it's meant to do for the people of Kenya, whether it will be the ultimate, solution to the problems that bedevil us economically, and whether at the level of parliament, then it will sail through. If it doesn't sail through, whether there's going to be some adjustments to it, or perhaps it will be dropped. So President William Ruto's Finance Bill 2023 proposal has created jitters among the civil servants and now the opposition. The Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition leader, that is Raila Odinga, has raised concerns of the proposed bill, alleging that it was a move by the government to punish Kenyans. Odinga now says he has directed members of parliament allied to his coalition to vote against the Finance Bill 2023, saying it is a piece of punishment that Kenyans should be deeply concerned about. Micah Gungo with that.
His Excellency! President William Ruto's administration targets to raise 2.8 trillion shillings in the 2023-2024 financial year. The Finance Bill of 2023 has, however, been described by the opposition as being overambitious, terming the new tax proposals as irrational. Azimio leader Raila Odinga opposed the move, directing the opposition members of parliament to vote against the Finance Bill 2023.
They are enjoying artificial majority in parliament, but we say that our members, those who are with the Azimio and who have got conscience, will oppose these proposals.
Speaking in Nairobi Monday, the former Prime Minister wondered why the Kenya Kwanza government wants everyone to contribute towards affordable housing, yet not everyone qualifies to own a house under the scheme.
In an economy where employees are already faced with reduced income due to high cost of goods, we find the introduction of this new tax irrational. It further reduces the amount of disposable income available to the economy.
The Treasury has formally proposed changes to the Employment Act to allow a deduction of 3% from employees' basic pay to help fund President William Ruto's ambitious plan to build low-cost homes. Odinga termed the move a unilateral decision that must be opposed. According to Raila, the tax should remain at 1% and should be applicable to sales of 1 million shillings and above.
Kenya Kwanza wants to deduct 3% of basic salaries to finance affordable housing scheme. How the regime arrived at 3% and not 1 or 2, nobody knows.
Raila demanded that instead of subjecting all government employees to new mandatory taxation, the regime should instead reduce the size of the government, do away with some cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, directorates, advisors, aides, departments and cars gobbling up finances with no good value for money.
It makes no sense at all for a Kenya Kwanza operative to spend 20 million shillings on a chopper to distribute 1 million worth of food. It makes no sense for a principal secretary to spend 10 million shillings on a chopper to deliver 200,000 shillings at a fundraiser.
He demanded that domestic and international travel, conferences, workshops and trainings be reduced. Odinga said he had directed MPs allied to his coalition to vote against the Finance Bill of 2023, saying it is a piece of punishment that Kenyans should be deeply concerned about.
Kenya Kwanza members who also have got the interests of ordinary Kenyans at heart, some who still feel about the hustler which they used, will see the fallacy of trying to introduce these measures here.
These coming hours after workers' unions decried implementation of the planned tax regimes and urged Parliament to reject proposed amendments in the Finance Bill of 2023. Mike Kagwango, TV 47, Nairobi.
As from that very story, and as I had told you earlier on, we have a CPA, Dr. Githai, who's a public financial management advisor. That is donors and governments, basically across. Thank you so much, Dr. for creating time to be here with us. I'm told economists would always prefer to be referred to as CPA as opposed to doctor. Which one is best?
CPA starts.
CPA starts there. So CPA, Dr. Githai. But of course, as I refer to you, Dr. would suffice?
That's okay.
That is okay. Karibu sana. Thank you for creating time to be here with us for the very first time on Morning Cafe.
Yes.
And we discuss very, very important things in relation to the economy. Yes. And as well, we have CPA Alex Kamau, ISPAC representative. Thank you so much for creating time to be here with us this morning as we get to this very conversation later on. Political historian, that is Professor Macharia Munene, will join us again for the very same conversation. Thank you so much for creating time. ISPAC has done a great job in terms of just helping us unpack the situation of finances in the country. And here we are at it again. Looks like ISPAC will always have work all through. The economy, not in the best of shape, but then again, an introduction of taxes that appear as though they would pinch into the pockets of the common mwananchi even more. Of concern is that even when the government would take these taxes, the unfortunate thing is that we do not experience the developments in return. Perhaps that is why Kenyans are saying that really we might not have a problem with being overtaxed or being taxed, but we would want to see value for money. What do you make of the 2023 financial bill so far?
Thank you very much, Linda. Let me start by also acknowledging our institute chair, that is FCPA George Mukua, who in his wisdom decided to allow me to come to TV47 to represent the institute. My name is, as you have said, is CPA. I probably forgot to say doctor.
Doctor,
CPA Dr. Alex Kamau.
So you people tell me which comes first. It's actually CPA Dr. Alex Kamau.
Yes.
My apologies for that. So
yes.
CPA stands in this case?
Yes, CPA Dr. Alex. Yeah, for sure, CPA is okay. So, because of course you differentiate myself and the doctor. That's fine. You have asked a very relevant question. What is my take about the proposed financial bill?
Yeah.
And I would say it depends from which side you are looking at it, because there are two people who are majorly affected by this bill. That is the taxpayer and the government.
Yeah.
There are areas that the government has given some leeway or some relief to the taxpayer in terms of lowering the tax rates.
Yeah.
But there are some areas that the government has actually proposed to increase the tax rates and also to widen the tax bracket. On the other hand, the government is also, some areas it is pushing to increase the tax revenue collection by of course increasing the tax rates. But on the other hand, the government is also trying not to increase the tax rates, because if it does so, it is going to increase the cost of living, which is already high.
Yeah.
The inflation is already high. The issues of exchange rate is already high. So it is a tight balance for the government to ensure that it collects enough revenue for it to be able to pay the balloon in public debt, and also not to hurt the plight of the common mwananchi.
Aside from the ballooning debt, there is also the budget that is being proposed, likely to sit at about 3.6 trillion. Over the years, we've not been able to sustain our very own budget. So of importance actually is making sure that we're able to sustain our budget, then think of how we're going to manage the debt situation in the country. Just what do you suppose the government is doing in this conversation of tax? Overtax them so that you create a balance? Does that really work?
Thank you, Linda. I think for the purpose of viewers, it's good to bring out some aspects. And basically, is in any society, the society comes up with what we call the government, and then the government is responsible for implementing the projects, and then those projects are from the engagement with the society, and this comes during the campaign, during the elections. And then those projects are supposed to help the well-being of the society on one side. And then that's why then we normally have what we call the policy budget statement, which is normally presented within the course of this month and next month. So those are the projects. Now, for these projects to be financed, then the government, as the other side of the coin, which is basically the finance bill. And the finance bill is basically the proposed way within which the government wants to raise the income or revenue to finance these projects. So what the society does is to tell the government, okay, go ahead and implement the projects, use the finance bill also to raise resources and finance. What happens is then as the government implement the projects, we also have what is called the oversight. It's part of the society, which is the members of parliament and the rest. And then we also have the judicial. So there are three components within the society which are charged with execution of projects and income, which is government, oversight mainly, which is the parliament, and now the judiciary in the event there is some disagreements and the arbitration. So what happens is, and even before then, I just want to make it very clear that psychology of human beings is human beings don't want to pay taxes.
Yeah.
And that's where the rubber meets the road. Human beings don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to be taxed unless you can convince them that when you tax them, you are going to give them benefits. And this is even historical, is religious. So the most important thing is to assure that the taxpayer that once you tax, you are going to give the benefits. So we need to look at it from both sides. That if you tax through the finance bill, then on the other side, implement the projects which will give the taxpayer the benefits and the comfort he or she needs.
Okay.
That is where there's a problem. There's a problem.
At what point can we trust the government to, assure us, or have they failed to assure us that, well, even as we tax our way to prosperity, whether that is realistic or not, then there's guarantee of you experiencing the best of services, the best of development. Perhaps that's a conversation that we should be revolving around. And just what then does the government need to ensure or to do to make sure that people are convinced that it's fine, you will take money from us, but then again, there's going to be value for that money. Of course, the housing conversation is one that brings a lot of fear in relation to this, and perhaps that one is what has, it's something that has a target to it. You can evidently see that there are structures coming up, but just what is the guarantee that those ones that pay for these structures are going to be the ultimate beneficiaries of them? This is basically what we'll be having this morning. And as Dr. here says, is that most of the times people do not want to pay taxes unless they are convinced that there's going to be value for money. I remember during the BBI conversation when there was that introduction of tax breaks as well as tax holiday. And said, who said we do not want to pay tax? We want to pay tax for as long as we're going to get value for that. So that is the conversation this morning. The hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela TV47KE. I'll be looking at some of your comments as we continue with the broadcast. Allow us to take a quick short break and then we come back with the doctors as well as Professor Macharia Munene.
Wakati mwingine kama weekend, mimi najiachilia.
Hata ukumbuki hii story. Nikifika watu wangu wakinipokea na kupokeleka. Umeset the mood. Nimeset the mood. Naweza kupokeleka. Nikisema kwamba mzima popote pale ulipo nikikukaribisha katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi. Jina langu Elizabeth Mutuku. Katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi tunakupa nafasi kutangamana nao kila siku ya Alhamisi kuanzia saa 1:30 kuendelea siku nyingine. Tutapatana papa hapa umjue kiongozi mwingine.
Jiunge nasi toka hapa ufuoni mwa bahari. Meli yetu itakapotua nanga kwa uhondo ribo ya riwaya hii mwisho wa kosa. Monica.
It's early morning in Maralal. Start your morning informed, educated, entertained, and above all, know your country. From the beautiful plains of Samburu County to the skyscrapers of Nairobi, Morning Cafe certainly got you covered. Indeed, a beautiful place to watch and certainly a moment of understanding and knowing your country. Indeed, to the remotest parts of every county. Join me, Linda Alela, every weekday from 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. And this is Morning Cafe. The hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela TV47KE. In studio with us, CPA Dr. Gidai, who is a public financial management advisor, both for donors and governments, as well as CPA Dr. Alex Kamau, who's seated right next to me, is PAC representative. Thank you so much for creating time to be with us, gentlemen. We now officially get into the conversation. Interestingly, you find that this is the story that is the biggest story across all the papers this morning. It is about, the tax plan, and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga says that Ruto's tax plan is a big burden. We always have to put a tag on this, because then again, it is evidently about the Kenya Kwanza government, and everybody's talking about the Kenya Kwanza government tax plan, Ruto's tax plan. And so I think the buck stops with them as to, making adjustments or approving as it is, and, confirming to the people of Kenya that this is going to work to, to make us perhaps have, answers to the economic tough times that we've had over years. You will agree with me that one of the key things that, most of the parties were campaigning on in relation to how they get to entice the people was on the question of the economy. We actually called it an economic elections, because basically it was about reminding the people of Kenya, that the Jubilee government has not done well. The economic tough times that have been, brought aboard by the COVID-19, by the drought situation, by the Ukraine-Russia war, and many other, things in the country. And so it was all about giving the people of Kenya the promise. So the People Daily speaks of what it is that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga has to say in relation to the tax proposal. The Daily Nation says Raila takes on Ruto in a taxes battle. And then again, there is the Standard newspaper that speaks on tax pain. You are on your own. Now, this is what perhaps Kenyans would fear the most, because they say opposition coalition opposes the proposed new tax measures and makes an admission that the finance bill may pass in parliament because of government's overwhelming majority. In fact, I don't know, I think I have that note by the Azimio team. They're not in any way a little bit lenient. They're not. They are hard. They're hitting it hard, and they are complaining that the government is not doing it so well. And of course, what they say, and with Azimio not providing alternative measures to rein in government appetite for extra money, Mwananchi has been left on their own. Mwananchi has an option of presenting their proposal, and I think the lines are open for them to do so. Not so much time left, and we'll be looking at the timelines and just how the Mwananchi then gets to present this. What do you make of the headlines first?
Yes, the opposition is doing its work, which is to oversight the government and to try and speak on behalf of the Mwananchi. Because there are these tax policies proposals that have been put forward by the government, and the opposition now would want to step in and say there are taxes that we feel they are counterproductive to the economy of the country. So basically, that's what the opposition is doing, and they have that fear that even after public participation, which you are doing by trying to unpack the provisions of the Finance Bill 2023 to the general Mwananchi, and they are supposed to relay their concerns. The general Mwananchi, the Wanjiko, is supposed to relay their concerns to the elected leaders, so that at the end of the day, the MPs will go to the parliament and also share those concerns, and they will either be considered favorably or not favorably. So there's that concern that the Azimio is raising, that because of the parliament being composed and being constituted majorly by the ruling party, this public participation may not add so much, may not be successful at the end of the day, because they feel it's like the die is cast.
All right, the die is cast, and there's zero belief in what would happen at the level of parliament in terms of having consideration or putting consideration to the cries of the common Mwananchi. That beyond the Azimio team, we have even heard some of us that are Kenyans that probably understand the aspects and the prospects of economy, saying that, well, this perhaps would not be the right direction for us. So overlooking what it is that the Azimio side would say, because then one would say that is politically instigated. Do you suppose the Kenya Kwanza team would be considerate of the common mwananchi, because it's at the level of the parliament that even as we present our proposal, it is for them to make those two considerations, and it's the majority minority. If they enjoy the majority, and then this is a proposal by their very own government, what are we expecting?
The most important thing is both the formations. That's Kenya Kwanza and Azimio. They came to the society and they discussed through the campaign and engagements.
Yeah.
And what happened is Kenyans decided to choose the current formation, which is Kenya Kwanza. Mm-hmm. And that was based on the manifesto they have. And they went ahead and entered into what we call the social contract. So the Kenya Kwanza as a social contract with the Kenyans to implement certain projects. These projects and programs have to be financed in one way or another. And I think that's why the Kenya Kwanza has come up with the proposed taxes through the finance bill. Mm-hmm. And that will be discussed in Parliament and among other forums. I'm sure there will be changes here and there. And most likely it might go through. In the event it goes through, this is the only way that it becomes an act of Parliament, which therefore will be able to actualize the raising of these taxes. Mm-hmm. I think we need to look at the issue in a different way. If Kenya Kwanza wants to raise, say, 3.6 trillion, then the most important thing and prudent thing is to ask, if I get 3.6 trillion from the Kenyans, then I have to use these funds so prudently, like the way you can be able to invest in a project, so that then you can be able to spur the economy, to get more benefits, and then so that subsequent years, you can even say, look at it, I got 3.6 from you guys, I expanded the GDP, and then these are some of the benefits you are getting. You are getting. So this is the conversation we should be able to have between the Kenyan society and the Kenya Kwanza government. So that subsequent years, then you can be able to say, by the way, instead of even raising 3.6, why don't you put 5 trillion, for example? If the benefits are there. I think the challenge we have is how well is Kenya Kwanza going to use the resources which is going to be raised through the finance bill in accordance to Chapter 12 of the Constitution, which is public finance. And of course, the subsequent Public Financial Management Act 2012 is amended by 2015. So the most important thing is the utilization of these resources. It's where the challenge is.
Dr. Githai, that for sure is a fact. And that has been the challenge over years. And perhaps one would be forgiven to ask this question or to argue that fine, they could even guarantee us that they're going to put this money to use, that this money is not going to be used for corrupt activities. This money is not going to be fleeced. This money, we're going to see roads, we're going to see, universal healthcare being implemented, to the maximum. We really are going to see industrialization, booming up. We really are going to see so much playing out in the country. But even before it gets to that level, Dr. Alex, reality is that Kenyans might not even have this money. And I'd want to look at what it is that, the Azimio speaks of. And they say there are a couple of things that you need to understand about the salary of a common mwananchi today. They highlight where some of these salaries then would go. They speak of the fact that, 4 things will be involved. And I hope I can remember what it is that they speak of. First of all, they say that, your salary will either go to paying loans, your salary will go to taxes, your salary will go to, hand-to-mouth affair, and literally then you're left with nothing. So even before you promise us that for sure this tax is going to be put to use, where is the money to tax?
For sure. A very good question, Linda. And I think it's not that the Kenyans are overtaxed. It's the fact that Kenyans don't see how their money is being used. Because Scandinavian countries, that is Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, they are the highest taxed in the world. Actually, the highest income bracket for the Scandinavian countries is 50%. That right now, the current finance bill is proposing to increase the highest taxed Kenyan from 30% to 35%. For Scandinavian countries, it is already at 50%. If you earn 100,000, automatically 50,000 goes to the government in form of taxes. And that is direct taxes. There are those that are called indirect taxes, like when you are consuming fuel, there's VAT. And in terms of VAT for Scandinavian countries, it averages about 25%. And the average VAT, and the VAT here in Kenya is 16%. But again, when we come to the research, which is the happiest country in the world, you will find Sweden, Denmark, and Norway being coming among the top happiest countries in the world. So they are the most taxed, and they are the happiest.
The happiest.
So
because then there's value for
because
what it is
because there's value. Yes. So when we come to the local context here in Kenya, we may not say that we are highly taxed compared to the Scandinavian countries going by the parameters that I have shared. But now the concern is that Wanjiku doesn't feel the impact of the taxes that he's remitting to the government in terms of the issues. For instance, right now the universities are struggling with the issue of help. Even the government is struggling to relay the money that is supposed to give to the county governments. There's the issue of there's the issue, and of course, when the county government don't have money, then the private sector, which does business with the county government, doesn't flourish, because the people who do roads, the people who do projects with the government, whether national government or a county government, they do work and then they stay for months before getting paid. So because of that, as you are saying, there's not much money in circulation, and the little that is in circulation has been, the purchasing power for that money has been eroded by the skyrocketing inflation that we're experiencing. So there's a big question as as Kenya Kwanza, the current government, tries to raise that revenue so that it can finance its projects and programs. The question is, do Kenyans have that money?
Do Kenyans have that money? And you speak of help, and I know of the numerous cases where people have been, sought for evading to pay, help, for evading to pay taxes. Because perhaps you're looking at your 50,000 and you're thinking, now, this 50,000 cannot even manage my own needs at this very point. So how then do I even pay for help? How do I pay for these other amounts of money that the government is speaking about? So it's fine. You could say that, well, if you guarantee us that in a huge way we're going to get value for this money. The question is as simple as, where is the money to tax anyway?
Good. Leader started by saying the psychology of human beings is human beings don't want to pay tax. They don't want to be taxed. Unless you can convince them that once you tax them, for example, each shilling you tax, what the taxpayer wants to see is, show me whether I can get benefits more than 1 shilling. Because that is what a taxpayer wants.
Is that to say then that we're trying to shoot this bill early, even before we've understood what the government intends to do with the money? I mean, we have not given the government the chance to explain to the people of Kenya that, yes, we're going to do this, but at the same time, we guarantee you that in 2-3 years' time, then you will reap the benefits of it.
Actually, while you are there, this is the first budget for the 2023-24 budget, which
and
is
for the Kenya Kwanza government.
Is the first budget for the Kenya Kwanza. So to that extent, I want to agree with you. But the most important thing is the taxpayers just want to be taxed and get a benefit. Actually, we call it tax give, tax give, tax give. To that extent, therefore, it's very important for the programs which have been put under the policy budget statements to stimulate the economy and to spur growth. If you stimulate the economy, if you spur growth, then you get more money. And that answers your question, do we have the money? Where is the taxpayer going to get money? But if that does not happen, then I agree with you. The taxpayer has an issue with that. So the most important thing is, once the taxpayer is taxed, then that money must be put into proper use. And Constitution is very clear. Chapter 12 of the Constitution, Public Financial Management Act, as well as Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which is leadership and integrity. talks well in terms of how the resources should be used for the purpose and comfort of the taxpayer.
I want us to understand this,
yes.
Dr. Githai. Just what then is the bone of contention with the bill that is being presented right here? If the government has come out to, just try and tell the people of Kenya, could you just please give us some time, allow us to do this, and we guarantee you that there's going to be that element of change that we've all been longing for. What then could be the bone of contention with this bill at this very point? Let's perhaps look at some of the highlights, and I think, okay, well, maybe not so clear because I'm using my email, but all the same, let's just look at the economic highlights of the proposed budget and tax changes as, what would be perhaps the main problem. Introduction of taxation on digital tax assets, restriction of interest on foreign exchange losses, the proposals to include a new pay as you earn, that is tax bracket of 35% for an employment income above 500% or 500 per month. And I mean, Kenyans are asking just how many Kenyans earn 500,000 per month anyway. Proposal to reduce the income tax rate on monthly retail or rental income and withholding on rental income from 10%, that is to 7.5%. Proposal to increase the turnover tax rate from 1% to 3% and alter its bracket to about 0.5 million shillings, 15 million shillings. Exporters taxable services are now proposed to revert to exempt from VAT or from VAT. And then removal of a provision on application of waiver of penalty and interest increase in tax shortfall penalties on deliberate omission from 75% to about 200%. Reduction of the rate of IDF from about 3.5% to 2.5% of customs value, and that is RDL from 2.5% to 1.5% of customs value, and introduction of a new levy on specified goods, the export and investment proportion levy. The bill proposes to introduce 20% deposit requirement for taxpayers appealing to the High Court. That is from tax appeals tribunal refundable into the High Court decides in favor of the taxpayer, and a couple of other ones. And I mean, the latest, or what many people are talking about is on tax, that is on fuel, and also the question of housing. And then we ask ourselves, fine, what could be the main bone of contention? If the government is going to guarantee us that there's going to be value for this money, that after 7 years, then you'll have your own home, or after 20 years, then you'll have your own home. Why do we complain if the government is telling us? And I mean, I doubt there's any better way of them telling us that just give us time and you'll see the benefits of this.
I think what is happening, there's no problem with the government even increasing the taxes, but probably the timing is the one that is not very right.
Is there going to be time that is right ever? I mean, the conversation on the fuel levy is not foreign to us. We have been through this before.
Yes. And the last time we had that discussion, there was a huge public outcry.
Yes.
And actually the proposed rate of 16% was reduced to 8%. And now what the government is trying to do is again to push it to 16%. We are likely to see again a public outcry. And the reason I'm saying that the timing is not right is because the economy has not actually really recovered from the effects of COVID-19. There is still these effects of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, the issue of the drought in the country. So if the government perhaps can consider to implement these new changes gradually instead of at a go, then the reception by the general public would be a bit better. We have seen cases where the government, last year, in the finance bill for 2022, the government had proposed to ask the taxpayer to give a deposit of 50% of the tax that is in dispute before he could be allowed to appeal for that tax decision in High Court. That decision or that requirement, that proposal was shot down. And now the government again has come again. This time around, they are not asking for 50% deposit of the tax that is in dispute to be deposited by the taxpayer to the Commission of Taxes. Now they're asking for 20%. It is somehow better than the previous proposal by the government last year. But nonetheless, there are people who would argue that when a taxpayer is required to give a down payment for him to access the right to have a fair hearing, that would be by itself.
Yeah.
That would be by itself amount to the taxpayer accepting that he's also guilty. And that would also prevent many taxpayers from accessing the right for a fair hearing. Because if you are asked, for instance, we have had even cases where someone has been given a tax assessment of 10 billion, 50 billion. So if you ask to give a down payment of 20% of 50 billion, before you get a fair hearing, that would impede justice to the taxpayer.
Right.
So those are some of the issues that are raising concerns to the general public.
Okay.
And that's what we look forward to see how the government will be able to navigate around that.
May I mention something?
Yeah.
I think you're asking a very important question. What's the problem?
Well, what is the problem, really?
The problem is, and if you look at it, and I think this is where the media needs to come out very clear.
Yeah.
You flash back. During the campaign, none of both the opposition and the Kenya Kwanza told us about how they will be able to raise the taxes. Because these Kenyans did not want to hear.
In fact, they told us how they will reduce.
Yes. Now, Kenyans are asking, you could have told us these things during that time.
Right.
So why now? Okay. But what the finance bill is doing is a normal way of raising taxes and even the policy budget statement. But the most important thing is, and I think we need to ask ourselves, even in future, I think politicians need to be telling us the truth when they are campaigning.
Okay. The proposals that you have seen, and I believe that you've gone through the bill itself and the proposals that have been made, and some of them that I have read right here. Do you purely agree with all of them? Because we are at that delicate stage where we decide, is this going to sail through as it is? Is this going to, be quashed? Or are we going to make amendments to some of the proposals that have been made? Looking at the proposals, as an economist, what do you make of them? Which one would you suppose should be adjusted, or should they sail as they are? But of course, with a clear explanation as to the possibilities of us getting results.
There will be definitely amendments to the proposed.
You think so?
There will be.
Okay.
Because when we talk of the issue of housing, Kenyans have a lot of questions in relation to that.
Yeah.
When it comes to, for example, that anybody who is earning more than 500,000 will be able to pay that 5%. So the question is, should you tax that person more than the corporate tax, which is 30%? So these are some of the amendments I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is to look at the finance bill as intended to finance the public budget statements, which are the projects. And these projects should be able to do two key things. One, they should be able to stimulate the economy and spur growth. So it therefore means any shilling which is collected must be used prudently in accordance with the Constitution, especially chapters 12 of the Constitution and the Public Financial Management Act.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Because in any case, you are raising money from the Kenyans, so you have to invest it prudently to achieve benefits. Yes.
What do you make of this opening? And I know it's a constitutional right, and perhaps Professor Macharia Monene should answer that best. But then again, I'll ask all the same that we have until the 20th to give our very own view, and present our memorandum to the August House, so that they decide whether they loop in some of the proposals that we have made or not. And I think I started by asking this: just how much does that count?
That's a constitutional right.
Yes.
And you agree with me that Kenyans are very political.
Yes.
So they will raise those comments.
Would this be on political basis or maybe economic basis, and especially coming from specialists?
I think in relation to, it's more political than economics, because money has to be raised to finance the projects. I think that's one of the things we need to be clear and to accept. The only problem is Kenyans were not brought to this reality during the campaign, during the electioneering period, and I think they have been caught with the reality now that the finance bill has been able to come in. But the next thing is, if it is sailed through, because most likely it will sail through with amendments, then it becomes a law.
Okay.
Once it's law, then you have to pay the tax.
Right.
And then the next thing is to be assured by the person collecting tax that this money will be used for the purpose intended prudently to achieve efficiency and effectiveness.
If amendments would be suggested, having gone through the proposals that are there, what do you suppose in your own capacity would require that aspect of amendment briefly?
Yes, if amendments are effected and the bill becomes law, then the taxpayers will have to comply with the law now.
But what are these specific ones you think would require amendments?
It is probably many things are likely to require amendments, and this is now the stage that the general public is interacting with the finance bill. So, but basically, like what we have seen cases when the government had proposed a certain rate. For instance, even the issue of the housing development fund, National Housing Development Fund. In the year 2018, the finance bill for 2018 had proposed that a rate of 1.5% be charged from the salaries of the Kenyan employees to go towards the project of housing development. But again, there was a huge public outcry, and that provision was actually scrapped out from, it was not enacted to law. So we are likely to see, there are cases even reading from the past, when the financial proposal that had been shared in a finance bill, some were amended, some were not amended. So for this one, because it was just released about a few days ago, it is on Thursday, and this is the time that Kenyans are interacting with it. We, as the Daktari has said, we are likely to see some sail through without any amendments, but others are likely to be subjected to amendments or even to be scrapped out.
Daktari, allow us to take a quick short break.
Yes, okay.
And unless I'm giving you 1 minute. 1 minute is okay?
Yes. Some of the things which are likely to bring in amendments is things like a VAT on fuel.
On fuel?
Because you see now, if we bring it into 16, that's going to raise the fuel pump. That will trigger the cost of living. So I would expect. Although the Kenya Kwanza government does not believe in the issue of subsidizing, because that one is a special case of subsidizing. You know, now it's 8%. So if it goes to 16 as is being proposed in the finance bill, I'm a bit concerned about that. The other one is the issue of NHIF. For those who are not employed, where do you get money to pay there? I think about 1,000, some to do that. So there's some of this.
That would not be a priority.
And also the issue of, I think, some deposit to be paid when you have some issues with the KRI.
Yes.
I think that's on the side which it should be seen and should be suitable for amendments. Because KRI just doesn't require the money from you until and unless is a legitimate tax. So there should be no business of deposit when it comes to tax issues.
All right, interesting. You know, you speak of the campaign times, and I remember I was at the presidential debates, part and parcel of the team that was making it a success. And the president, as deputy then, highlighted just how much there would be need to look into this levy of fuel because it's outrageously taxed. And, he said they would look into just the realities and the nitty-gritty details of it to make sure that it goes down. But look what is happening today. Allow us to take a short break and then we come back on that very note.
Wakati mwingine kama weekend, mimi najiachilia.
Hata ukumbuki history. Nikifika watu wangu wakinipokea na kupokeleka. Umeset the mood. Nimeset the mood. Naweza kupokeleka. Nikitumai kwamba mzima popote pale ulipo nikikukaribisha katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi. Jina langu Elizabeth Mutuku. Katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi tunakupa nafasi kutangamana nao kila siku ya Alhamisi kuanzia saa 1:30 kuendelea Siku nyingine tutapatana papa hapa, umjue kiongozi mwingine.
Jiunge nasi toka hapa hadi ufuoni mwa bahari, meli yetu itakapotua nanga kwa uhondo ribo ya riwaya hii mwisho wa kosa. Monica.
It's early morning in Maralal. Start your morning informed, educated, entertained, and above all, know your country. From the beautiful plains of Samburu County to the skyscrapers of Nairobi, Morning Cafe certainly got you covered. Indeed, a beautiful place to watch and certainly a moment of understanding and knowing your country. Indeed, to the remotest parts of every county. Join me, Linda Alela, every weekday from 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
The diversity of Kenya's wildlife has garnered international fame.
This is pellets that we give to the tourists, the giraffes. We ration because we don't want the giraffes to eat too much of this. We want them to have more of the natural browse.
We may not always get the opportunity to go out to see the wildlife, but you will never miss the opportunity to see it from the comfort of your couch.
This is home to animals that have been found out there either injured, abandoned, or confiscated from people who are holding them illegally.
Only on TV 47 Wildlife, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m.
Disability is a club that anyone can join.
I live with special needs. It means I have a limitation. There are things I can't be able to do personally myself.
And in our journey to talk about disability, we tell the stories of those with disabilities and even sit with specialists to understand what it means for those affected directly and indirectly.
Everybody's life, mine has also been faced with ups and downs.
If it becomes a self-stigmatized thing where you feel like you are judging yourself too harsh, you blame yourself, and you perceive that it happened because you failed.
Join me, Zainab Mohammed, on Beyond the Limit.
As the people of Kenya, as enshrined in the Constitution, to the august house, so that moving forward, we see whether they voted to sail through, whether they're going to propose amendments, or whether they quash it at that very level. The ODM side will remind us that, well, of course, the House majority is Kenya Kwanza, and then the possibilities of them seeing this bill sail through are extremely high. Just what will be left of the common mwananchi who feels like they would be necessary, it would be necessary for us to have adjustments on the financial bill. With us in studio, right next to me, I think we'll begin with you right now, CPA Dr. Alex Kamau, as well as CPA Dr. Githai, will be with you. Although, and finally, Professor Macharia Munene, the long-awaited one, is here with us. Thank you so much for creating time, Professor. Thank you. Professor is a political historian, and so we want to borrow some bit of history in relation to the problems, the economic problems that we've witnessed over time in the country. I am sure you have interacted with the copy of the 2023 financial bill, or finance bill, so to speak, and we ask ourselves just what way or what next for the people of Kenya. I think I was asking the gentleman, just what is the bone of contention if the government were to guarantee us today that, you know, every single penny, every single coin we take from you will be put to use, and in future you will get to experience the benefits of it. What would be the bone of contention anyway to this one?
Well, first, everything is political.
Yeah.
Everything. And,
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It can be both.
Yeah.
Right now, it's not good.
It's not good.
Right now, it's not
Well, we say that politics is the bloodline of every other activity.
Everything.
Yeah.
And sitting next to financial wizards here, I hesitate to delve into the depth. But it's a political problem. The government of William Ruto has a problem, an image problem.
Yeah.
It appears to be double speak. He says one thing and seemingly does another.
Most governments do that, Professor.
Yeah, but they are careful on how they appear to do it.
Okay.
They just got a bad.
Yeah.
I think then also the philosophy of it. What's the purpose of government? Is to enable the citizens in the place to enjoy a good life, to expand the economy, to do everything that is comfortable, they feel nice, and to be proud to be part of that. But when the government appears to be going contrary to that, it appears to be oppressive. And taxation is one way of oppressing people.
Okay.
So that's why I say the government is having a problem, because it appears to be oppressive. Whether it is or not, I'll leave that to the
specialists.
The specialists.
All right.
But from the ordinary citizen like me, something is wrong. Perception. The best example of this is the housing tax. The logic of it does not make sense.
At all?
No.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Professor, you understand the difficulties that we have today of owning homes, and every Kenyan desires that.
Yes.
And reality is that what it is that we make cannot guarantee us that. There's a clear deficit in relation to that. Why does it not make sense?
The government cannot guarantee a home.
Okay. Now that is also one thing, yeah?
As simple as that. But it can create an environment
that is
in which
enabling
environment in which everyone who desires can desire and build a home.
Is it not with the tax proposals that we're having now?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not. First of all, the way I read it, right or wrong, you force everybody to contribute 3%.
3%.
It's not a choice.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Right.
With a promise that in 15 or 20 years' time, you might own a home. Might.
The line might.
Might.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's one. Then the people who might even have access to those affordable houses will not afford.
Okay.
It's simple as that. Today, those flats, because they are flats, but they are going for what? 2, 3, 4 million shillings? Assuming somebody is earning 30,000 shillings.
Yeah.
And those are, in Kenyan standards, they are not doing badly.
Yeah.
Now, when will this person pay the 2 million shillings?
To manage. If 3% is going to be deducted from them.
There's something wrong with the logic.
Yeah.
And the explanation, the government is not doing a good job of explaining it.
Professor, it's 3% from you, 3% from your employer.
Yeah,
so it amounts to 6%.
Okay, assuming it's you.
Let's just say 5%.
I don't know what you want, that's okay. The 3%, let's assume you want 20,000 shillings.
Yeah.
3% of your 20,000 is 6,000, plus another 6,000 from the employer.
Yeah.
That's 12,000.
Right.
Yeah? When will these 12,000 become a million?
Amount to a million.
You'll be dead, long dead and gone.
Yeah.
So there's something wrong with the logic, and people can see it. That's why the grumbling is. So wait a minute, you're not making sense. And the credibility of the government is very necessary for it to function.
Yeah.
Because the minute people doubt its credibility, it does not matter how good the plans are. It does not matter what the logic is. It's just lost credibility. And unfortunately for the William Ruto government, it's losing credibility on this count. That alone. Then you look at the behavior. Our MCAs now want to be given about 4 times their salary. When there's no money.
Yeah.
And they're saying they're going to go on strike. And that's what we are seeing. These are privileged people who are hoarding the public money when there's no money. The MPs, the other day in Mombasa, and they said they were going on strike. Imagine these MPs going on strike. And they are in a very luxurious hotel enjoying this. Even they did not matter whether they were in Wazimio or the other, the Kwanzaa.
Yeah.
They all said they are going on strike. And you are sitting there like, these people, what's going on? And there was no Ruto MP, there was no Raila MP, they were all together. And then after they were given the money, so there was money, so they were given. Then they would go back to the hotel, the nice hotel. They had never left. So now they go back to the meeting and start talking, now what can we do about the country? You know, and then they said, what's wrong with these people? So where did the government get the money to pamper the MPs in Mombasa? Mm-hmm. That's the optics, eh?
Yes.
You know, and then of course, Raila is very happy.
At this point.
Oh yes.
Because he swims and
he's got ammunition and he's using it.
Yeah.
The excessive hiring of some strange people. And people say, do you need that person? Do you need that person there?
Yeah.
And that's money, yeah? Mm. And so the expenditures, it was Ruto's advisor, who is David Lee, who said they are wasting money in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And this is from the inside.
Yeah.
So those from the outside watching this thing, and then the insider says, yeah, we are wasting things. Mm. It creates a very bad impression as to whether the government is credible, whether the citizens can believe in it. And the impression being created is that the money, yes, they'll take it because they'll just take it anyway. Mm-hmm. It's got nothing to do with fairness. They'll just take the money and then they'll misuse it as they are doing.
Yeah.
So the NHIF, and
yes, the NHIF also.
They check what's going on, and that misuse is confined to a few people, and they get away with it.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying the government is having problems
in how they
credibility. For people, it needs to work extra hard, and instead of raising taxes, it should be lowering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Logistically speaking, but even before we come to that, Professor, I think the gentlemen who are economists should tell us whether they'd confirm whether 26% or 3% of 20,000 would be
300 shillings.
300 shillings, not 6,000 or 600. 600, not 6,000. Sorry, 600.
6% of?
No, 3% of 20,000.
Should be 600.
Yeah, all right. So it's not 6,000.
You see, that's why I didn't do very well in everything.
That's why you and I did not.
That's why we are here. In fact, I was being generous.
Yes.
Now, take their figure because they are the wizards.
Yes.
That's 600.
Yes, 600.
Or 1,200. Uh-huh. When will it get to 1 million?
When will it get to 1 million?
You know, these are simple logics. Eh?
Yes.
The people are asking, please give us a better explanation than that. Huh? I don't know who is advising the president on these matters. Yeah. He has a battery of people called advisors, led by David Lee. So, what's going on? And I think there is a confusion between economics and politics. And that's why we have a discipline called political economy, which balances the political necessities and the economic needs.
All right, so here we are, and they are clear economic needs. Professor, let me take it away from you.
But they have to be
balanced.
How
do you
with
balance
the political necessities? Because without politics, there will be no economics.
And this is the reality. Then we ask this question, fine. We'd want to say, instead of raising the taxes, you should be lowering them. Logistically speaking, and even if, as an economist, and you're trying to balance the papers, reality is that we're not in the best of state. Yes. And we don't need to be explained to some of these things. You know, it's not rocket science. It's evident that really economically, we are not doing well. Yes. We're talking about the budget, we're talking about the debts. All this is supposed to be financed by the taxpayers' money. How can we even think of reducing the taxes anyway?
That's for sure. It's a very tricky situation that we find ourselves in because the government has only two sources of revenue, either to tax its citizens or to borrow, because we are not very lucky that we have natural resources. There are countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait. Those ones, they rely heavily on their natural resources in form of oil.
you think we do not have enough natural, we have oil in Turkana. What happens to it?
Yes, the exploration of that oil is still in the formative stages. Yeah. We hope that at the end of the day, it will be found to be productive to even mine it, because sometimes we can use so much resources mining, and what we are getting does not justify that process.
That process, okay. Yes.
So at where we are right now, we have no choice to continue borrowing, because if we are to tax, if we are only to rely on the tax collection revenue, then the Kenyans would be hurt more, because right now the Kenyans are already feeling the pinch of high taxation. So if now we decide not to borrow, it will be even worse. But I would give an appreciation to the Kenya Kwanza government, because it has actually reduced the fiscal deficit from the budget of last year, where the amount borrowed vis-a-vis the GDP was at 5.8%. But now the amount borrowed for the proposed budget, it is at 4.4%, because we are borrowing about 700 billion. If you divide 700 billion by our GDP, which is projected to be 16 trillion by the end of the 2023-24 financial year, multiplied by 100, it comes to about 4.4%. So that by doing that, even the government is very conscious and alive to the fact that it would want to reduce even the debt ratios, because when the previous government was leaving office, there was a time that the debt to GDP was at 68%. Right now it is about 60%, the national debt to GDP. The one that has been recommended by IMF as the sustainable ratio is at 55%. And the government, that's why we can see the government taking those steps towards achieving that sustainable level. So in the meantime, the Kenyans will have to bear that pain. But in the long run, if the government implements everything as it is, then we might enjoy at the end of the day.
Kenyans would want to know just what exactly do we mean by in the long run. Timelines, give us timelines to this. And Dr. Githai, reality is that I am not an economic guru, I will tell you for free, but the possibilities of this continuing and us continuing to experience economic downturn are high, because first of all, we're talking about elevated cases of inflation, we're talking about high interest rates, we're talking about further weakening of the shillings. Timelines to this in the long run, what exactly would that be?
Kenyans were not told the truth during the campaign.
Yeah.
And for reasons I do not know, they also did not question why they were not being told the truth.
Do you suppose those ones that were campaigning had the truth with them? I know you'd want to say that the deputy government, that the current president was a deputy then. Perhaps they did not understand, and you could tell it from how they reacted after assuming power that, oops, we did not know that we're going to inherit empty coffers. So maybe they did not know.
Since they were not told the truth during the campaign, they have to be aware these are some of the consequences.
Okay.
And the consequences are such that they have to accept the first budget to go on, and then see how it will be implemented, because it's the first budget for the Kenya Kwanza. Then that way they are able to rate the utilization of the resources which have been collected from the Kenyans. I think that's one of the things which Kenyans have to
deal with,
to bear and deal with, and learn a lot from the politics, so that next time, as the professor is saying, we need to ask ourselves: should we trust the politicians or should we trust the economists? The other thing I also want to mention is, and I think professor needs to hear this, I still maintain from the history, taxpayers or human beings don't want to pay tax unless they can be assured that that tax will be used for the purpose and the intention to benefit the same people being taxed. So to that extent, there is need for any government which is taxing Kenyans to do two things. One, to have very high level of financial discipline. If it lacks, then I can agree with the professor, the credibility is lost. Now, the next thing is what we call enforcement standards. Our enforcement standards are very low. People will steal money and get away with it. I'm told the end of the budget is lost. Whether it's true or not, I don't know whether standards have been done. But if we talk over, even if it's not even a rand, but a whole trillion out of the 3.6, that's a lot of money which can be able to address the issue of tax savings. So this is where Kenyans need to be convinced that yes, we are taxing you, but at the same time, we are cautious of how we are spending this. Some of the recent, and I can agree with the opposition, some of the recent actions by the Kenya Kwanza, I think they don't convince the Kenyans that there is financial discipline. I think that's something which we need to quickly address.
How best can they? How best can they? Maybe Professor, as a politician, would tell us how best. Is it how you package your information? Is it just coming out to them and, with blatant truth, tell them it's going to be tough, but here we are, and in a certain time we will manage this? How best can they do this?
Maybe they need to change their talking tactics.
And lie to Kenyans?
No.
And
what they've been saying sometimes has appeared as a lie.
Yeah.
So they need to change that.
Okay.
So that what they say sounds credible. And people can say, that somebody has spoken like a mature person. There is a difference between people who speak maturely and immaturely. There are some times when some people in the government speak and you imagine that's an immature person. We need to change that to the point where when you speak, people say, Linda said that, okay, that's Linda, it's okay.
But is it not what we are saying, that during campaigns, with all the maturity, they spoke to the people of Kenya and told them, this is what we're going to do. This is not what they're doing right now. So how much can we trust that?
No, we don't trust politicians too far. And careful about it. But the last election, if you look at it carefully, it really was an emotional. And there are a lot of people who voted against Uhuru Kenyatta. Not so much William Ruto.
Right. It was a protest vote.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. And the consequences did not seem to matter very much. And remember one time Uhuru told us that he's losing 2 billion shillings a day. Through some
corrupt activity.
We have not been told whether those routes have been closed. And so the 2 billion which is disappearing every day
could still be
disappearing. About which is almost 1 trillion shillings a year. And so when you say you're going to tax us more, you say so that it can go again. So the way the president and his deputy particularly address the public is important. And maybe they need to talk less. And there are some other people who can do the talking for them. They need to talk less so that they are not held accountable to everything. Right now, they have given the impression that they have to respond to everything that Raila says. And not just Raila, but Raila's subordinates. Whatever they say, Gachagua and Ruto have to reply. You say, now, what are you doing? In fact, those other people don't mind if you do that. So we then go back to the Kibaki era. He inherited an economy which is as bad, even worse than this one. Yet, by adopting policies that made sense, first he told people, if you want money, it is in the bank. Go to the bank. And people went to the bank and they got loans, they got money at a fair price. So the banks which used to behave very badly, big banks, they did not want to see ordinary people like you and I. So suddenly they opened up. They were on the street saying, do you want to open an account? It was that helped to stimulate the economy, change things around.
But that worked then, Professor. Why are we here today if really that was a
That's what you need to find out. How did we get in here? We talk about the IMF. My good friends have talked about that because the IMF said we have to do it. So in the first place, how did you get into that mess of the IMF, which is the one now dictating what happens in Kenya instead of the people we elected?
Yeah.
How did we get there? So the philosophy behind it needs to be questioned.
Okay.
And there are those who think that you don't have to do everything the IMF says. As long as you got your act together. So get your act together. And then you can negotiate with the IMF. Then we have the debts we are being told that we have incurred, which most of us don't know how they were incurred.
Yeah.
Yet we are paying for things we don't know. They can be rescheduled. But then rescheduling with the lender, whether it's the Chinese or whoever it is, it's a political act. Yeah? Because you have to talk to these people in a respectable way, and they talk to you in a respectable way, and you agree, yes, some things can be done. Yeah? That means they don't have to have their thumb on your throat. Yeah? When it's a matter of discussion. Yeah? So do we have the right people talking to the lenders or not? Or we are just being told you have to do it because the IMF said, what? Yeah. There are just a few men and women called the IMF sitting somewhere. And I said, no, wait a minute, you are not making sense. You know, you don't want to drive people to a point where they feel desperate.
Yeah.
And my concern right now is that the citizens are being driven to a point of desperation. And if they are driven to a point of desperation, all the theories don't make sense. We have a problem in Sudan.
Yes.
Those uprisings. What are those theories going to help now?
Nothing.
When you have a major uprising that really makes leaders look awkward, to be polite.
Yeah.
People are starving. And if you ask properly what happened, there were bad decisions at the top.
Yeah.
Or they didn't pay attention to advice, to good advice. So before you can say the IMF has said you must, let's also look at the country. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Are we in a position to drive the country into desperation when maybe you can find better ways of dealing with the issues?
Okay.
And a long time ago, and the economists would say, there used to be a fellow called John Maynard Keynes, who used to argue that in times of crisis, the government should get into deficit spending. Why? Make people believe they have something to do. Give some, like the National Youth Service, give them something to do, and you divert their attention.
They used to call it kazi
mtaani. It was an attempt, but they didn't do a good job.
Okay.
But the philosophy is the same.
Yeah.
At the same time, Keynes also pointed out, when the economy picks up and it's sitting up, you withdraw.
All right.
Slowly. I think we are in that situation where we should be thinking of deficit spending without taxing people. Otherwise, if your tax base is very small because nobody has a job, what are you taxing? And that's the confusion that we have right now.
So we can't tax our way up to property.
No, you can't. So, but we can find ways of increasing the tax base by ensuring that a lot of people are working, producing, and then they'll pay.
I stay 30 seconds more on you. I mean, unless you're a stranger in Jerusalem, you witnessed what happened with I think it was a fuel levy at some point in time when the nays had it somehow in parliament, but the ayes eventually had it. You know, you could hear a lot of nays, but eventually the speaker said the ayes have it.
Yes.
And that clearly tells you.
Was not very good.
And that clearly tells you that perhaps this is basically what is going to play out in relation to this. So then what?
Well, that's why you need sober minds.
Yeah.
We do need sober minds at every level of decision making.
Yeah.
And I will not complain if these two gentlemen were asked to help in the thinking. Because they do. But we need to rethink. The whole country needs to be rethinked. Not just the economists or the financial wizards, and not just the MPs. And sometimes they have problem thinking.
Yeah.
The whole country.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
Okay.
How can we get out of this mess? Because we are in a mess, and it is not a preserved of a few people who hold high offices. It's a national challenge.
It's a national
because
challenge.
when there is an uprising, we are all affected.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it can be done.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be done.
And we take a quick short break, Professor, and come back and ask the gentleman, do you suppose the president is being advised well economically? After this short break.
Wakati mwingine kama weekend, mimi najiachilia.
Hata ukumbuki hii story. Nikifika watu wangu watu wakinipokea na kupokeleka. Umeset the mood. Nimeset the mood. Naweza kupokeleka. Nikisema kwamba mzima popote pale ulipo nikikukaribisha katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi. Jina langu Elizabeth Mutuku. Katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi tunakupa nafasi kutangamana nao kila siku ya Alhamisi kuanzia saa 1:30 kuendelea siku nyingine. Tutapatana papa hapa umjue kiongozi mwingine.
Jiunge nasi toka hapa hadi ufuoni mwa bahari. Meli yetu itakapotua nanga kwa uhondo ribo ya riwaya hii mwisho wa kosa. Monica.
It's early morning in Maralal. Start your morning informed, educated, entertained, and above all, know your country. From the beautiful plains of Samburu County to the skyscrapers of Nairobi, Morning Cafe certainly got you covered. Indeed, a beautiful place to watch and certainly a moment of understanding and knowing your country. Indeed, to the remotest parts of every county. Join me, Linda Alela, every weekday from 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
The diversity of Kenya's wildlife has garnered international fame.
This is pellets that we give to the tourists, the giraffes. We ration because we don't want the giraffes to eat too much of this. We want them to have more of the natural browse.
We may not always get the opportunity to go out to see the wildlife, but you'll never miss the opportunity to see it from.
All right, a bit of your feedback. One says, mimi kama mwananchi wa kawaida, here are my proposals, so this is my thinking. The 3,000 housing levy to be abolished. Who says I want a house? Maybe I own one already. Maybe I'm on mortgage. And what makes my employer not pay me less or put me on casual labor contract in order to avoid that new deduction for him? And the reality is that most of the people actually are even paid cash so that we do not pay NHIF, NSF and all that. And it is happening in the country. Perhaps they need to look into that. And as they speak of, those ones that evade tax, they go ahead to say 3% turnover tax. I might have transacted 500K in a year, but half of it or more are bills, deductions, and salaries. An additional 15,000 deduction is just adding to my losses. Maybe if it's a must, let them put in the business licensing and payable in the installments throughout the year. And then more taxes on fuel or achane nayo. Is the president being advised as should be by the Ds of this world?
It's a yes and no. And if I can pick up from where the professor left, the issue of restructuring the debt and refinancing. IMF has also become very aggressive because we can borrow from the case of Ghana, where Ghana were almost in the verge of defaulting their national debt, and they reached out to IMF for bailout. And IMF said that if you have to come to your rescue, then the local investors who have bought your treasury bonds and treasury bills, they also have to suffer. And we saw a case where the IMF was recommending that the treasury bonds that have been purchased by the local investors in Ghana, the interest payments on those bonds had to be suspended for 3 years. And actually, the local investors were not allowed to even withdraw the money. We saw a case in Ghana where a retiree who had a chronic disease, actually suffering, being unable to access medicine because he had invested with the government, so that maybe after every 6 months the government gives him some interest for the bonds, that treasury bonds that he had invested with them. But now IMF suggested that if you cannot come to us every other time as IMF when you have been unable to manage your debt and come to us saying that we need some debt forgiveness, partially or in entirety. So this time around, I think the president is very alive to that fact, because IMF, if we don't comply with the conditions that IMF is pushing forward, then it will not be a walk in the park. IMF will push back. And if they push back and they tell us that, and you know, at the moment, the national debt that the Kenyan government owes, 50% is local and 50% is external. So if we go to IMF, telling them to suspend some of the conditions that are put into us, they might push back and say that even the local Kenyan who has invested with the government also have to feel the pinch. And I think that's why now the government is trying to avoid going the Ghana's way and saying, let's see how much we can be able to tax ourselves for us to be able now to reduce the fiscal deficit. But now they are also confronted by another hard fact that you cannot tax yourself to prosperity. Right. It's like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself using the same bucket that he's inside. So at the end of the day, the government has to come with some strategies to ensure that we borrow just enough and we raise as much tax revenue from within as much as possible.
Do you think the KRA, the government itself, has its structures well set at this very point? If today we say on our marks, get set and go, even with the current proposals that are there, then we'll be good in terms of collection, in terms of making sure that there are people who do not evade taxes, in terms of making sure that, fine, we have sealed all loopholes of corruption. And in your own wisdom, is the president getting the correct advice?
Even before I answer that question, I think there's a question which has come
from the viewer.
Yes, from the viewer relating to the housing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the area is not very clear. And I think, as Prof is saying, there is need for that message to be communicated. What is this issue about housing?
3% and all that.
Is it that if I contribute, I will be allocated, or is it a pooling of resources?
Yeah.
Because my understanding is pooling of resources. So that at least we can do, I think there is social housing, and also the other one is affordable housing. And this one is to increase the chance that in the event, even if I don't get a house, at least someone like Prof will be able to get allocated.
And the irony of it is there are others who are saying from Kenya Kwanza that eventually then perhaps the money could be given back to you, or you could transfer it to your wife's account.
Yes.
And it's not quite clear.
It's not very clear. And I think there's need for that to be communicated to the taxpayers.
Yeah.
But my understanding is pooling of resources. That in the effect in long term, it might also reduce the price of housing.
Yeah.
Because much of the house prices is based on the supply. So if the supply is going to be increased, maybe that in the long term might be able to help.
Yeah.
My colleague has talked about debt, and that's an area where there's a major problem. And in most cases, especially at debt where we are paying in hand currency, and we are not stimulating the sectors like tea, like coffee, like tourism, which are earning us exports. I think that's an area which is causing a lot of problem when it comes to pressure which is being handed over to our Kenya shillings. But to come to your question, I think as to whether the president is being advised correctly or not, I think the whole thing comes back to the issue of what choices do we have. When you're in a problem, like for example, if you start getting an headache, then that's a signal that you have a health problem.
Yeah.
So you have two choices: to accept that you are not feeling well, and see a doctor,
right,
and then you are treated. The alternative is you get into what we call denial mode. You deny you're not sick, and the consequences might be, or your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah.
So where we are is not a matter of whether the president is being advised correctly or not, but it's a choice we have to make. First, have we accepted we are in problems? Now, even when we are asking ourselves that question, our actions, our talks should be such that we are in serious problem. And then from there, we come up with what we call mitigating strategies to address that. I think that is what Kibaki's government did when it came and found that the coffers were about 200 billion. Then it came to ask, so what do we do now that we're in this challenge? So the immediate thing is for the Kenya Kwanza government to accept that this economy is in serious problem. And therefore, we should talk, we should do things, we should make decisions which convinces Kenyans that we're in serious problems and we have to make painful decisions. I think that's a major challenge which currently the Kenyan government is facing. Yeah.
Radical approach, painful approach, it looks like we still are at the mercy of the IMF. And I mean, at some point in time, Davide reminds us that you really do not want to be in the bad books of IMF because it will not be rosy for you. And I think we've seen this playing out across all the African countries, that if you are in bad books with IMF, it is not going to be good with you. So how do we create that balance, again, beyond politics, beyond our economy, and I mean also with the global fraternity?
It's a difficult one because we found ourselves in a fix. The IMF fix and the World Bank. These are institutions that are controlled by the United States.
Yeah.
If you are, for some reason, not in very good books with the United States, you are likely to have some IMF problems.
Yeah.
Like, and if for some strange reason you appear as if you and the Chinese understand each other,
it's even worse.
Then the IMF has a problem knowing what you are talking about.
Yeah.
So it's a global political situation. It is not simply economics. It is global politics. And how we got into this mess in the 1970s and 80s, some countries were induced to borrow money they did not need. I think Kenya might have been one of those, because those World Bank people have portfolios to build up.
Yeah.
So how many loans have you given out to which? How many countries? They'll pay later is not the issue, but just portfolios. And then after some time, the loans suppose started maturing. And when they were giving this money, Linda, they knew the money was not going to be used in the country. They knew. It was going to some accounts somewhere else. But since it's portfolio building and scratching backs, so the countries are suffering
today
because of the bad decisions that were made at the time with the understanding of those institutions.
Okay.
Not that they don't know that the money is going back there. They know. But it's a loan that the country is now saddled with. The challenge that comes up is for new policymakers everywhere to realize that and then try to figure out how do they come out of that jam. Reduce it by reducing the borrowing, and apart from reducing the borrowing, then cut on the unnecessary expenditures, which we have a problem cutting, because our presidents are good people. They like big motorcades. And some very big luxurious activities. So and then as they do that, they should also be very careful not to appear as if they might threaten the interests of the sponsors.
Yeah.
The IMF, the World Bank, and their sponsors in in the West, mainly in New York, in London, in Brussels.
Yeah.
These are the people. So if they think that their interest might be threatened, they can be very vicious.
Yeah.
We have right now a realignment of two alliance systems coming. We have the G7, the conceptual West, and arising out of that, mainly in response
of
to the control.
Yeah, control.
The BRIC system that's emerging.
Yeah.
BRICS right now has about 5 countries officially, but there are about almost 30 other countries that want to join that.
Yeah.
And part of the reason they want to join it is because of the alternative financing system.
Yeah.
Which the BRICS is coming up
with,
to deal with the problem of the SWIFT. So now these are very serious developments.
Yeah.
And people who are doing that should be careful because they can die. It's said that part of the reason Gaddafi died is because he was saying he's going to start an African currency?
An African currency, yeah.
Yeah, that is an alternative to the dollar. And some people say, no.
We're not about to allow you to do that.
You cannot do that.
Yeah.
So the people whoever comes into office and has those ideas has also to be very careful and to know the dangers, because it's a dangerous game. It said, let's say in the context of Africa, some of the people who have died in Africa is because they appeared to threaten those interests.
Yeah.
So poor Lumumba died. And what was his crime? People say that Congolese resources will be used by Congolese and Congolese interests.
Yeah.
He died.
Yeah.
Murtala Mohammed in Nigeria didn't even last very long.
Yeah.
Then he died. Sankara,
yes.
he died. So there is a pattern. If somebody is going to raise fundamental questions, has to know how to deal with these forces in such a way that they don't feel too threatened to kill you.
Yeah.
Because they will do that. If you don't do that, if you do not know that, be careful. Don't get into things you don't understand.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then it can be worked out.
Okay.
And but it needs care. It also needs a lot of information, critical thinking, and independence of mind.
Okay.
We have a problem of leadership that does not have independence of mind. So we are still waiting for advice from the IMF and the World Bank, or somebody sitting in Brussels or London to give us advice, even on how to govern ourselves. Those challenges that require deep thinking, not just one person, but collective deep thinking, so that we can have a movement together in the right direction.
You see, the scaring bit of it is that in the prospect of the Westerners, as a professor would pretty much well highlight, then the global outlook of the people of Kenya economically does not look good, does not look promising. And on constant occasions, we've been asked, or even the president has been asked, do you suppose that we will almost go the Ghana way? And then he says, no, we're not about to go the Ghana way. This in line with the prospects of these superpowers. What does it speak to us? That perhaps the end is not nigh, or the end of us bowing to the systems of the West is not nigh? Doctor?
I think the way we are going to conduct ourselves is the way we'll be taken. And we have good examples where Kibaki did not mind about that. And I think within 10 years, he made sure that we maintained our dignity. And if his debts, those were paid.
Magufuli did well.
So I think we have lessons to learn from someone like Kibaki, the 10 years.
Yeah.
Why would we not get back to that? So what you are saying is a possibility, but I think we should be able to have what Prof is saying, critical thinking and visionary leadership, which calls for our dignity, so that at least we are respected globally.
One of the reasons why...
One of the things I'm also not happy is the current program where we We are encouraging young people to go to, that's what we are discussing with Alex. We are encouraging young Kenyans who are educated to go out of the country to go and work. I think we need to rethink about that, because what will happen within the next 10, 15 years, we are going to have a generation which has gotten out of the country. Then some of us will be getting old. So are we supposed to manage the economic activities which will be demanding youthful and energetic?
But it's factual that we have a problem with employment.
Yeah, but we have to fix it here, including and that's why I'm talking about stimulating the economy and spurring growth. It was done within 10 years by Kibaki. Why can that be done? So, because the money which is coming from diaspora, surely, I think that's not something to motivate us as a government policy to encourage young people to get out of the country.
And we'll come back to you, Professor, on diaspora remittances.
It's an area which we need to rethink.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Professor. But first, Alex, I will pick up on that conversation of Kibaki, and we constantly refer to that. We remind ourselves of that. But then the question is this: if really Kibaki did well, don't you think we could have had structures that would not be shaken by any kind of regime that comes on board? And perhaps that's the reason why some of these nations that we speak of are doing well, because the leaders that were there and made the right decisions. They made long-term decisions. They set up structures and systems that were solid enough to carry the country over years. So if Kibaki did well 100%, why is it that we enjoyed the fruits for 10 years? It was like, just basically like the presidential term limits. We're talking about 5 and that's it.
Yes, I concur with that. Kibaki did actually very well, because when he was inheriting the country, the level of public debt was 68% to the GDP. But when Kibaki was leaving the leadership, the level of public debt, he had managed to lower it to 44%. Now, when the government for Uhuru took over, by the time Uhuru was leaving, again, we were in 60s in terms of public debt vis-a-vis the GDP. What Uhuru's government did, they relied so much on commercial loans, because commercial loans are they are charged at a very high interest rates, as opposed to what Kibaki was relying heavily on. Kibaki was relying on concessional loans, and if he couldn't get concessional loans, he would go for semi-concessional loans. And that's why during that time of Kibaki, we didn't issue a Eurobond. But as soon as Uhuru took over, in 2014, we issued a Eurobond of $2 billion US. Then in 2018, we issued another $2 billion US. And in 2019, we issued. And the other subsequent loans that we have been borrowing, usually the largest part goes to repay the existing loans. So it becomes like we are borrowing from Paul to pay Peter. So yes, Kibaki, if the subsequent presidents would have followed in the footpath that was created by Kibaki, in terms of what kind of loans do we go for? And we see when Uhuru came into power, there was a bit of a mismatch between the income and liability. You see, like now, we are panicking that when it comes to 2024, next year, we are likely to struggle to repay the $2 billion US that we borrowed in form of Eurobond in 2014, because that's when the 10-year will be lapsing. But you see, prudent financial management calls for introduction of something of a sinking fund, that because we knew that in 10 years' time we are required to repay the $2 billion US loan, then we would have introduced a kitty that every other year we save a 10% of the $2 billion US, so that at the end of the expiration period, we wouldn't be struggling to say, where do we get the money? Or we would not be forced to go again to the international markets to borrow another loan. And we are suffering a refinancing cost, because even last year, the government had reached out to the international markets to borrow $1 billion, the government was unable to do that because the interest rates that the international markets are demanding is so high and punitive that the government said this is not the right time to borrow. Sure. Even right now, as we speak, the Eurobond that the Kenyan government borrowed, it is not trading at a yield of about 19%. So if we were to borrow another Eurobond, it would not come.
Which is in the pipeline.
Which is in the pipeline. It will come if at the end of the day we will agree to borrow, it will come at a very high interest rate. And actually the government had been advised to oppose that suggestion of borrowing another Eurobond until the international markets go down to about 7% in terms of interest rates. Right now what is doing, and the developing country, the emerging markets like Kenya, we are experiencing a capital flight where the foreign investors, they are relocating their investment from emerging markets, developing countries to developed countries like US and the West. Because what has happened is due to the monetary tightening by the developed countries and more so the US, where they keep increasing the Federal Reserve rates, investors find it safer to invest in US other than the developing countries. Because investing here has a lot of challenges. One is the issue of the weakening currency, that you can invest here and you are promised a 10% return on your investment. But again, by the time your investment is maturing, assuming you had invested with the Kenyan government for about 2 years, by the time the two years is are elapsing, then the Kenyan currency would have lost value maybe by even 15% against the dollar. So you see, you have received a return of 10%, but you have the currency has lost value by about 15%. So you see, you wouldn't want to risk and invest in such kind of a project.
May I add something to what Alex has talked?
Briefly, Doctor.
Two things. One, Kibaki gave us the constitution, which requires that we enter to work very hard to meet the threshold contained in the constitution. Then the other one was the Vision 2030. And I think deliberately we seem to have deviated from that. And there's nothing we could have, Kibaki would have done to us. So the subsequent regimes, I think we are not able to meet those standards because Kibaki set the standards.
Okay.
And we are supposed to achieve them.
All right.
If I may add just to that. Yes, Kibaki laid the foundation, because your question was, if he did, then what happened? He ruffled the wrong feathers. Okay? Right from the beginning, when he said it's equal treatment for everybody, even the British have to go through this, no favoritism.
Okay.
I remember one time Chatting was complaining how the British government was trying to force her to give favor to the British pharmaceuticals. And he said no. And for that reason, he appeared like a bad man. One time, Edward Clay had said what? That he used to have civilized relations with Moi, which he doesn't have with Kibaki. Now, the consequence of that was an attempt to overthrow Kibaki. There was. Orchestrated very well. The 2005 referendum had very used to do with the document. It had everything to do with getting rid of Kibaki. The ambassadors and the people were saying if the north side wins, Kibaki should get out. Although, you say, no, what are you talking about? The 2007 chaos was orchestrated very well.
Okay.
As a way of...
Okay.
So because he was doing well, he became an enemy to some forces. And we saw all those chaos. There is a good book that it was not about Kenya, but it applies. It's called The Shock Doctrine and the Rise of Disaster Capitalism by Naomi Klein. You seem to be getting independent. Forces come and destabilize you. And Kenya was being destabilized during Kibaki's presidency.
Okay.
For the purposes of control. And that. One thing about the remittances. I think you're going to ask.
Yes.
They are very good, but they cannot be the source of everything.
They can't.
They can't. And for them to be operational, we also need to build a very strong base here, so that they have interest in this place. Let me suggest something which is ridiculous, and the economists can see. When you get that money, the $2 billion you're saying, it was 2 billion equal to a certain amount of Kenya shilling at the time. When you are paying, you are not paying the same thing, which is wrong. And I think Alex was trying to explain it. Should be in the process of negotiation. And that's why we need good minds to make a case. You give me $100 billion in shillings. That's what comes to Kenya. Okay? I will return to you $100 billion in Kenya shillings, the way you gave me.
And maybe the
interest.
Yes.
That should be part of the negotiation.
On the table.
On the table.
It should not be altered by how the shilling is performing.
They do that and then they change the exchange rates and then you are in perpetual debt. You can't come out.
You can never come out of it.
No, you can't. So we need to have some radical change in thinking, so that, and it should be a concerted effort by the third world or the global south. Say, no, you give us, or you lend to us. If you don't want to lend, stay with your money. But you lend me $100. I'll pay, and it turns out...
It doesn't matter the market
situation. It turns out to be $100 is equal to what? 1,000 shillings or 10,000 shillings? 10,000 shillings. Now it's about 8. Okay? So that's what I receive.
Okay.
In order to know what I'm going to do. So, and since you have interest in Kenya, other interests, I'll return your money the way you gave me with its proper interests, and you can use it for your other Kenyan activities.
Fair enough.
So I don't know whether the economy can push that argument.
We're completely out of time, and so we have to close at this very point. But of course, a couple of feedback from you. Collapsed institution is the cause of all our misery on African matters. Our institution called AU is unfortunately dead. And of course, greetings from London. Dr. Masanga says that. And of course, Prof is correct. They will kill you. When I opposed ICC, a certain country wanted to go down with me. This is Dr. Masanga, who is watching as well. So much feedback coming you our way, but then time would not allow for us to go through them. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Right next to me is